Welcome to Season 1, Episode 3 of CREB Talks. In this season, we feature esteemed female economists from around the globe here to enlighten you with topics on economics and business. Today, our guest is from Connecticut. Her name is Jessica Leight. Jessica, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
So thank you so much for inviting me today. I'm excited to chat and have the chance to share some thoughts with the audience. My name is Jessica Leight. I am an economist. I completed my PhD at MIT in 2013. Before that, I did a master's at Oxford and my undergrad degree in Yale. I've always focused on questions in development economics, but within development, I've worked on a wide range of topics. I've done work in the areas of political economy, health, education, gender. My first position after I completed my PhD was at a liberal arts college, Williams College. And then I subsequently moved to American University, and following that to IFPRI, the International Food Policy Research Institute, where I've been working at the headquarters in Washington, D.C. for the last 5 years.
Was there any specific event or experience that inspired you to pursue a career in economics?
Specific event, but ever since I was a child, a teenager, I was very, very keen to travel. I was very interested in seeing the world and learning about as many different parts of it as I could. When I began my undergraduate studies, I actually thought I was most interested in politics or international relations. I was fascinated by the UN. And I was thinking seriously about majoring in political science. I actually completed an interdisciplinary major called politics, PPE, politics, philosophy, and economics at Yale. And it was only around my third or fourth year that I became more focused on economics, primarily because I thought it was a incredibly powerful tool for understanding a wide range of contexts and for, I hoped, contributing some knowledge or solution. But I should say that my background when I started graduate school was quite different. I had done some math, some programming, but not a lot. I had spent much of my college career studying languages or taking political science or philosophy courses. I had a much more humanities or global affairs oriented perspective compared to most of my classmates who typically came out of more quantitative disciplines.
A lot of your research focuses on gender norms and disparities, as well as nutrition in countries like China, Ethiopia, and Nigeria. What drew you to focus on these particular regions?
So my choice of context in which to study, I would say, has been full of happy coincidences or unexpected opportunities. My original ambition was to study China. And again, that just went back to choices I made when I was starting college. I was keen to tackle a new, different, challenging language, and I studied Chinese, and I spent some time in China after college. And so when I began grad school, I was eager to conduct research on China. I did start to do so, and working on China has been part of my research agenda ever since. At the same time, though, conducting field research, so a survey or a randomized controlled trial in China for a researcher who is not Chinese and not based in China is rare, and in fact has become, I think, even more infrequent over time. So the work I've done on China has not been primary field work, and I was interested in getting out to the field. I wanted to collect data, interact with people, work with non-governmental organizations, and so then I also started a second area of work primarily in sub-Saharan Africa. And there, again, it was based on opportunities, collaborators I met, organizations I connected with. My first randomized trial, my first field project was in Nigeria, where I only worked once. After that, I started working in Ethiopia, where I've now been working for many years. So you could say either open-minded or flexible or I suppose flighty, but I've tried to pursue projects that seemed exciting and where I found partners where I felt like I could make a contribution.
It's inspiring to see your work in diverse communities. What has been the most fulfilling aspect of your research in these areas?
So there are many aspects of research that are fulfilling. I think, of course, one huge one is building close relationships with collaborators in the countries where I work, collaborators at the institutions where I've worked, so academic collaborators at IFPRI. I think the best part about research is having the opportunity to just think very deeply about questions that may, at first glance seem quite different from our day-to-day lives, and to have a glimpse into a life, a context, a community that's very, very different from yours. I mean, that's a rare privilege, though not many of us get to have it. And there are many professions that can give you that experience. For example, journalism is a profession that I always greatly admired, but I thought I'm too shy to be a journalist. I couldn't go around asking strangers questions every day. I don't think I could manage that. So research is perhaps better suited for someone who's a bit more introverted. Of course, we do ask people questions. Usually I'm not the one personally asking the questions, so we get to participate in the process of thinking about the questions and the type of data that we need to gather, and then we have the chance to really think deeply about questions that have huge implications for people's welfare. So I do a lot of work on questions related to gender, intra-household dynamics, parenthood, division of labor inside household. So these are questions that are close to my heart. We all confront them in our own ways and in different contexts, but to see how they unfold in a context where the stake can be much higher, where people are facing much more serious obstacles, much tighter constraints on their day-to-day life than we typically see in the communities where I was raised and I live now. It affords us a rare opportunity to think deeply and also try to identify insights that might contribute to policy changes or other steps forward that are needed.
In your opinion, how do you think addressing gender disparities can affect economic growth in developing countries?
The question of gender disparities is certainly a huge one. We know that in a wide range of economies around the world, women's labor force participation is quite low. That's certainly not a challenge that's unique to low and middle income countries, but it's often more acute there. And especially as labor force shrinks, overall, the global population is no longer growing at the pace it was and soon will not be growing at all. It's incredibly important to make the most of the human resources that we have. So encouraging women, setting up systems that allow women to have the opportunity to contribute kind of in any ambit of life that they want to, can have really significant macroeconomic implications, increasing labor force, increasing productivity. And then there are also the microeconomic implications, right? So there's a lot of evidence that when women are more empowered, they have more decision-making in the home. That has positive benefits for children's welfare. It can have a range of positive local benefits in communities. There's lots of reasons to think that putting women in an equal footing can have benefits at many scales in many different contexts.
Okay. Were there any surprising findings in your research on gender norms in different countries?
There's a range of research on questions related to gender norms. And I've also done research on some closely related questions, for example, intimate partner violence, which is, a manifestation, as it were, of very inequitable gender norms. So I did one project in India and Rajasthan, where we were evaluating a life skills intervention that was targeting girls. These were relatively young girls in classes 7 and 8, but at a very key pivot point where we typically see as puberty arrives that dropout starts to increase very rapidly. So many girls finish their education around that age, not just in India, but in many other contexts. And typically after education concludes, then they're much more likely to marry, start childbearing, etc. And when those phenomena happen early, it can limit their ability to work, to have more autonomy or independence inside the home as well as outside the home. It was a life skills intervention that provided supplemental classes within schools with the objective of encouraging girls to prioritize their education, to prevent dropout, and also develop a whole range of what are often called life skills or non-cognitive skills. So agency, confidence, self-esteem, long-term planning. And we saw that after 2 years, that program had very positive effects. It both reduced dropout and also seemed to shift girls' behavior along other dimensions. So made them have more socio-emotional support. They were more independent, and they had broader and more ambitious long-term goals. So that was one intervention that was targeting kind of the early stage in the life cycle, right? These were girls. I've also worked on a whole series of related projects over quite a long period of time now in Ethiopia, working on a program that I developed with some colleagues targeting inequitable gender norms and intimate partner violence within married couples. So this is later in the life cycle. This is after a couple on marriage has been established. And the goal is to bring groups together, either couples or in some communities, men alone or women alone, in the context of a coffee ceremony, which is a culturally accepted context for group discussion, to talk about a whole range of topics around gender norms, relationships, sexuality, violence, and how violence arises, what its implications are within the home, and how both men and women can contribute to breaking those cycles, shifting those norms, and shifting towards a more equitable, happier, nonviolent relationship. And so we have gone through many phases of research on this topic, starting with just piloting this program, developing it. We did a large-scale trial that showed that it did reduce violence, so primarily when targeting men, and then have been doing follow-up work, thinking about scaling, thinking about other programmatic adaptations. And I should note that was in close collaboration with many colleagues over the years, but particularly an Ethiopian colleague at the University of Addis Ababa, who had been working on these topics in this context for many years and helped spearhead this trial. So those are just two, I think, of my favorite examples. They're very different contexts, they're very different types of programs, but both looking at the fundamental question of how we can shift norms about, girls and women, their role not just in families, but also in schools and in broader communities.
Are you considering expanding your research to other communities in the future?
Well, I think I'm always open to new contexts. On a personal note, I'm always hoping to visit new places. So I always get excited when I hear about a research opportunity in a country, in a region I haven't been to. And a good year is a year when I can start new work and see a new place that I haven't been before. Though, of course, I'm always happy to continue working in places that I know well. So yes, we are considering work in new contexts, though I still have a very active research agenda, for example, in Ethiopia, and that continues to be a priority.
What advice would you give to our listeners who are considering a career in economics?
So much high quality advice in this era on social media, blogs, and so many different sources about how to pursue a career in economics. And so I won't repeat the standard advice, which often centers around, a high level of early academic preparation and certain topics. And there's a lot you can learn there. I definitely recognize that, especially even now compared to when I started studying, there was so many new computing and quantitative tools becoming available, and now AI is revolutionizing the discipline. So there's a lot to learn that, even I didn't know when I started school. I think the most important thing to think about a research career is that it is a really, really high level of commitment to a very specific discipline. And that's somewhat unusual. Of course, there are other careers that require very in-depth training, but in many ways, a PhD is uniquely in-depth. It can often be very solitary. In general, we're all very fortunate to work in large teams, but when you do your PhD, often a substantial part of it, you work alone. So it's important to feel a real sense of purpose in what you're doing. And that can be in many dimensions. It can be questions you care about. It can be that you're fascinated by the discipline. It can be that you've recognized you'd like to make some contribution, or you'd like to take up some position that you can't do without the PhD. But one or all of those elements has to be present in order for you to feel, like, especially over a long period, 5, 6, 7 years, as you prepare to be a full-fledged economist, that this is something that you want. So I always encourage, when I talk to students or research assistants, to think about what they could do without a PhD, which is a lot. I mean, there's obviously a huge array of contributions, professions, exciting opportunities without a PhD, and then what you could do with a PhD. And you really have to believe that the second is what you want. And if you're not sure, then it's great to take a few years to work, consider some master's degree, pursue other opportunities, and that will either reinforce your sense that, well, there's still something missing, or there's still an opportunity that I would like that I can't take up without a PhD, so I should go for it. Or you might find another path where you think that you're able to pursue something just as fulfilling and just as valuable without a PhD, in which case, it's wonderful that you discovered that before and making such a substantial commitment.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for agreeing to do this interview. It was a pleasure having you here. We will link your social media accounts down below, as well as your contact information, in case anyone has any questions or would like to follow your journey. And we will see you in episode 4.